She never served. She stole our name. She made it all up. That's what my father said into a microphone, in front of 200 guests. At a gala celebrating a company built on software, I wrote in a canvas tent at Bagram Airfield while mortar dust settled on my keyboard. I didn't flinch. I didn't stand. I took a sip of the cheap champagne they'd poured into expensive flutes and let the metallic taste sit on my tongue like a reminder. My name is Elise Renard. I'm 37 years old, and up until 40 seconds ago, I was sitting at table 9, the overflow table, the one near the service entrance where the catering staff kept brushing past my chair, watching my father toast my brother for building an empire on code I wrote when I was 26. They don't know that yet. Tomorrow morning, 2 men in dress uniforms would walk through those same double doors. One of them would be a brigadier general. He wouldn't shake my father's hand. He wouldn't acknowledge my brother. He'd look directly at me and say 6 words that would collapse everything in this room like a building losing its foundation. But not tonight. Tonight, I folded my napkin beside my untouched plate and let Gordon Renard have his moment. Because some wars aren't fought with fists. They're won in what happens next. Growing up in the Renard household meant earning affection like rent, and the currency was visible, tangible. Something Gordon could hold up at a Rotary Club dinner and say, "That's my kid." Keith played varsity everything. Keith got the corner office at 19. Keith shook hands with the governor at a fundraiser, and Gordon framed the photo and hung it behind his desk, where it still hangs today. I was the intense child, too curious, too quiet, too precise. I dismantled the family desktop computer when I was 11. Not to break it, to understand how the bus architecture routed data between the processor and the memory module. I put it back together in 3 hours. It ran faster afterward. Gordon didn't notice. What he noticed was that I didn't want to drive trucks. I didn't want to sit in the dispatch office and listen to him bark orders into a 2-way radio at drivers who were already doing their best. I wanted to build systems that made the barking unnecessary. That, apparently, was betrayal. I commissioned through ROTC at 22. Second Lieutenant, United States Army. Materiel Maintenance and Logistics, MOS 91A. The day I left for Officer Basic, Gordon didn't come to the ceremony. Keith did. He stood in the back row and left before the oath was finished. I left quietly. No big send-off. No family dinner. Just a ride share to the airport at dawn and a bag packed with precision. What they didn't know, what I never explained, was that within 3 years, I'd be coding predictive supply chain algorithms in an active combat zone, routing assets through hostile corridors with 0 latency, that the system I built from nothing, from dust and caffeine and the blue glow of a monitor powered by a generator that cut out every 40 minutes, would become the backbone of something classified above my father's entire comprehension. But to Gordon, I was the daughter who fled to a desk job because she couldn't handle the real pressure of the family trucking business. Denial, I would learn, was their specialty. The cover story was simple. I told them I worked in analysis, consulting for government contractors, managing warehouse spreadsheets, the kind of work that made Gordon's eyes glaze over, which was exactly the point. Some clients prefer discretion. Every time I came home, which was rarely, the questions were the same. "Still pushing papers?" Keith would ask, pouring himself a bourbon he didn't earn. "Still hiding behind that consulting gig?" Gordon would add, not looking up from his phone. I'd nod, sip my water, say nothing. They hadn't just forgotten me, They'd rewritten me. In their version, I was the daughter who quit, who couldn't handle the family business, who ran off to some vague government job because she lacked the spine for real work. Gordon told clients I was let go for incompetence before my first deployment. He told family friends I chose a government paycheck over loyalty. He told Keith, my own brother, that I gave up. They painted a picture of a woman living in delusion, and every year that picture hardened into gospel. By 2015, I'd coded the initial engine, what my unit called Renard Alpha, during my deployment to Bagram. It was a logistics automation system that could predict supply chain bottlenecks before they formed, rerouting materiel through active corridors faster than any human dispatcher could calculate. I built it to save lives, to make sure ammunition, medical supplies, and fuel reached forward operating bases before the window closed. Gordon saw something else. He saw profit. He called me during a 2-week leave, said he wanted to adapt the civilian framework of the engine for Renard Freight, promised me a 50% stake, said it would be our thing, father and daughter, a partnership. I gave him the civilian variant, stripped of classified architecture, clean, functional, elegant. He never filed the partnership papers. I deployed to Camp Lemonnier, Djibouti, in 2018. Classified work. Functional Area 52. Nuclear and counter-proliferation, specializing in automated logistics systems. The kind of assignment where you don't call home, where your mail is screened and your phone stays locked in a SCIF, and the only light you see for weeks is the blue wash of encrypted monitors. While I was incommunicado, while I was routing classified assets through corridors that don't exist on any civilian map, Gordon removed my name from the company letterhead. He scrubbed me from the legal filings. He gave Keith the title of Vice President of Operations. He restructured the corporate charter without my signature. He built a $2.1 million empire on my code. And he told the family I quit. That was it. No call, no letter, no explanation. Just erasure. Surgical, complete, and deliberate. I found out 14 months later, sitting in a barracks in Djibouti, reading a forwarded trade publication that listed Keith Renard, VP of Operations, as the architect of Renard Freight's revolutionary fleet optimization system. The system I'd coded in a tent, during a deployment, in a war zone. I didn't react. I folded the magazine and placed it under my bunk. I went back to work. That was the last time I let their version of me occupy space in my mind. If you've ever been erased by the people who were supposed to know you best, hit that like button and subscribe. 9 years passed. I made major. I led 2 joint logistics task forces. I briefed Army Materiel Command on predictive threat routing. I earned a clearance level that would make Gordon's corporate NDAs look like permission slips. And I embedded something in the code I'd given him. A signature. A string buried so deep in the root directory that no civilian programmer would ever find it, because it didn't look like a signature. It looked like an error. A system glitch. 3 characters and a designation that meant nothing to anyone without my encryption key. ERR-04-Vanguard-SIG. Gordon's IT team had tried to delete it. Twice. It regenerated every time the system updated. They logged it as a legacy bug. They moved on. They had no idea what they were looking at. The thing about silence is that it isn't always passive. Sometimes silence is the sharpest answer. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday. Cream-colored cardstock, gold embossing. Renard Freight 25th Anniversary Gala, celebrating a quarter century of innovation. Innovation, The word sat in my chest like a stone. I wasn't on the guest list. Sarah Walker, my cousin, my oldest friend, the only person in the family who ever looked at me like I might be more than what Gordon described. She called me, said she'd added my name to the door. "You should come," she said. "You should see what they're saying about you." I already knew what they were saying. I packed a charcoal dress, simple, sleeves to the elbow, the silver logistics branch pin on my left lapel, crossed cannons over a wheel, small enough that most people dismissed it as a cheap fashion accessory. I wore it every day. No one had ever asked what it meant. When I stepped through the double doors of the Belmont Grand Ballroom, the air hit me like a wall. Expensive cologne, prime rib, the sharp sweetness of champagne that costs $40 a bottle, but tastes like it came from a gas station. No one was waiting. No welcome. Not even a nod from the hostess. Just a table assignment card with my name misspelled. Elise Renard, Table 9. Table 9 was against the far wall, near the service entrance. The chairs were smaller. The centerpiece was plastic, where every other table had fresh orchids. The message was architectural. I sat down. I placed my clutch on the table. I waited. The ballroom was a shrine to Gordon Renard. Banners hung from the ceiling. 25 years of Renard excellence. A timeline display along the east wall charted the company's growth. 2009, 2012, 2015, 2018. Every milestone, every contract, every expansion. Powered by software, I recognized the way a mother recognizes her own handwriting. And on every screen in the room, the massive LED displays flanking the stage, the monitors at the check-in desk, the tablets the servers used to process drink orders, my code was running. Blue interface, clean lines, the fleet optimization dashboard I'd designed in a tent in Afghanistan, glowing back at me from 50 different angles. Not a single screen displayed my name. Family photos lined the projection reel. All of them featured Keith. Groundbreaking ceremonies, handshakes with clients, a photo with the mayor. Gordon and Keith at the ribbon cutting for the new distribution center. Gordon and Keith accepting the Regional Business Excellence Award. Not a single one of me. Gordon sat at the head table, Keith beside him. Their matching lapel pins, the Renard Freight logo, a gold R over a wheel, caught the light every time they moved. Gordon's tie was silk. His cufflinks were monogrammed. He looked like a man who had built something. He looked like a man wearing my work. Keith spotted me first. He walked over with a bourbon in his hand and a smile that had too many teeth. "Elise, you actually came." He said it like I'd shown up uninvited to a party I'd thrown. "Still doing the consulting thing?" "Same contracts," I said. "Different problems." He laughed. The kind of laugh that's designed to be heard by the tables nearby. "Right. The spreadsheets. Must be thrilling." He leaned in. "Dad's about to give the keynote. You should listen. Might learn something about how a real business operates." I took a sip of champagne. The metallic taste coated my tongue. Keith walked back to the head table. He whispered something to Gordon. Gordon glanced toward table 9. His expression didn't change. He looked at me the way you look at a coat check you forgot to pick up. Then he stood. The room quieted. 200 guests turned toward the podium. Gordon adjusted his microphone. The blue glow of the LED screens framed him from both sides. My code, my architecture, my work, illuminating the man who stole it. "Ladies and gentlemen," Gordon began, 25 years ago, I started Renard Freight with one truck and a handshake. Tonight, we celebrate what this family has built. He gestured to Keith. The room applauded. My son, Keith. Vice President of Operations, the man who modernized our fleet, the man who turned a regional hauler into a logistics powerhouse. More applause. Keith stood. He waved. He sat back down like a man accustomed to ovations. Then Gordon's eyes found me. And I see we have a special guest tonight. His voice shifted. Harder. Theatrical. My daughter, Elise, who some of you may remember from before she left us to pursue. He paused. The pause was a weapon. Government work. Scattered laughter. Elise is a guest tonight, not a partner. She chose a different path, a safe path. He gripped the podium. She handles documents, spreadsheets. She was never part of the engine that drives this company. Even the champagne flutes on the nearest table seemed to tremble. He raised his glass. To Keith, the only son who stayed, and to Elise, who learned that in the real world, you can't just hide behind a uniform to escape hard work. The room raised their glasses. 200 people drank to my erasure. The blue screens pulsed behind him. My code cycling through its nightly optimization routine, running the fleet, routing the trucks, doing the work that built every dollar in that room. Gordon set his glass down. The applause swelled, and across the ballroom, near the service entrance, at table 9, I adjusted the silver pin on my lapel. I didn't stand. I didn't speak. My hands stayed folded in my lap. What they didn't know, yet, was that every screen in that room contained my signature. Every server in their data center ran on my architecture. And in exactly 20 minutes, a brigadier general was going to walk through those doors, ignore every handshake offered to him, and address the woman at table 9 by a rank that would turn Gordon Renard's empire to dust. They hadn't counted on one thing. I built the system, and I left the key inside. I stood. Not fast. Not dramatically. The way you stand when you've already calculated every variable in the room, and none of them concern you. The applause for Gordon's toast was still settling. Glasses were being refilled. Keith was accepting handshakes from men in suits who didn't know the difference between a logistics algorithm and a spreadsheet macro. Gordon was leaning into a cluster of investors near the stage, his hand on someone's shoulder, performing generosity the way he performed everything. Loudly, visibly, with witnesses. No one watched me cross the ballroom. That was the thing about being invisible. You could move through a room of 200 people, and not a single head would turn. I'd spent 15 years operating in environments where being unseen was the difference between mission success and mission failure. A gala in a hotel ballroom was nothing. The tech booth was in the far corner, behind a black curtain, staffed by a young man in a headset who looked like he'd been hired that afternoon. Ma'am, this area is restricted to... I need to run a diagnostic, I said. He blinked. A what? The fleet dashboard on the main screens is cycling through an outdated routing protocol. If it pulls live data during the presentation, it'll display last quarter's numbers instead of current projections. Your client will notice. He stared at me, then at the screens, then back at me. I work in logistics consulting, I said. Some clients prefer discretion. He stepped aside. The console was running a standard display interface, mirrored output to all 12 screens in the ballroom, plus the 2 flanking the stage. The back end was familiar. More than familiar. It was mine. Every directory tree, every module name, every routing pathway. I could read it the way a pianist reads sheet music, not word by word, all at once. I reached into my clutch and removed a small device, matte black, the size of a thumb drive. No markings, no label, just a single port connector and a 96-bit encryption key hard-coded into its firmware. The hardware key General Miller's forensic team had issued me 3 weeks ago. I plugged it into the root access port on the main terminal. The system hesitated. 1 second. 2. The young tech leaned forward, his mouth opening to ask a question he'd never finish. Every screen in the ballroom flickered. The fleet dashboard disappeared. The polished graphics, the animated trucks, the glowing route maps, the revenue charts Gordon had commissioned for tonight. All of it vanished, replaced by a black screen, white text, monospaced font, the kind of display that looks like nothing to a civilian and everything to anyone who's ever worked inside a classified system. 3 lines appeared on every monitor in the room. Root directory access, authenticated. Signature verification, ERR-04-Vanguard-SIG, confirmed. Original author, Renard, Elise M. Timestamp, 14th September 2012. Bagram Airfield, Afghanistan. I stepped back from the console. I didn't look at the screens. I didn't need to. The murmur started at the tables nearest the stage, where the screens were largest, where the text was impossible to miss. It spread outward like a ripple across still water. Conversations stalled. Forks paused midway to mouths. A woman at table 3 set her champagne down so carefully it didn't make a sound. Gordon was mid-sentence when he noticed. His head turned toward the left screen, then the right. His mouth stayed open, but the words had stopped. His hand, still resting on an investor's shoulder, went rigid. Keith stood from the head table. His chair scraped against the marble. What the hell is... He looked at the screens, then across the room. His eyes found the tech booth, found me. Elise. His voice carried, "What did you do?" I didn't answer. I walked back toward the ballroom floor. My heels clicked against marble in a rhythm I didn't rush. I stopped at the edge of the dance floor, equidistant between table 9 and the podium. I adjusted my pin. The small silver logistics branch insignia crossed cannons over a wheel, caught the overhead light. It had sat on my lapel all evening. Keith had looked right at it when he'd come to mock me. Gordon had glanced at it from the podium. Sarah had touched it once, years ago, and asked if it was a brooch I'd picked up at a flea market. No one had ever asked what it meant. Sarah was asking now. She'd moved from her seat at table 6 and was standing 3 feet away, her eyes locked on the pin, her lips slightly parted. She'd always been the one who suspected, the one who noticed when my answers were too short to be the whole truth. The one who called me from her car at midnight once and said, "Elise, whatever you're actually doing, just tell me you're safe." And I'd said, "I'm safe." And she'd said, "Okay." And neither of us said anything else. Now she was staring at the pin like she was reading a language she'd been trying to learn for 15 years. "That's not costume jewelry," she said quietly. "No. That's a branch insignia." I held her gaze. I said nothing. "You're not a consultant." "I work in analysis." Her eyes glistened. She took a breath. She stepped back. Gordon was moving now, away from the investors, toward the tech booth. His face had shifted from confusion to something darker, the expression of a man whose kingdom had just displayed evidence of its true architect in 12-foot letters across every wall. "Who authorized this?" His voice was loud, controlled, but loud. The room's attention was already his, but he made sure of it. Keith, get the IT director, now. Someone is tampering with our systems. Keith was already on his phone. I'm calling Davis. He's on site. He can... I don't care who's on site. Shut those screens down. The tech in the booth was typing. Nothing was responding. The hardware key had locked the display at the root level. The only way to override it was to physically remove the device, and the device required my encryption key to eject. If you've ever been underestimated by people who don't know the real story, hit that like button and subscribe. Gordon turned toward me. 200 guests watched him cross the floor. His stride was long. His jaw was set. He stopped 4 feet away, close enough for the front tables to hear every word. You think this is funny? Not a question. A verdict. No. You walk into my gala, my company's celebration, and you hack into our display system like some kind of... I didn't hack anything, Gordon. My voice was level. 5 words. 6. Never more than necessary. I accessed my own code. Your code. He said it the way you'd say, your helicopter to a child playing with a toy. This is Renard Freight proprietary software, developed by our team, funded by my capital. You have no legal claim to ERR-04-Vanguard-SIG. He stopped. That error your IT team has been trying to delete for 6 years, the one that regenerates every update cycle, the one they logged as a legacy bug and moved on. I let the silence hold. That's not a bug. That's my signature. Embedded in the root directory of every module in your system. Time-stamped September 14th, 2012. Bagram Airfield, Afghanistan. Gordon's face didn't move, but his hands did. They dropped to his sides. The left one closed into a fist. The right one opened and closed twice. A tick I'd watched since childhood. The tell that meant he was calculating whether to fight or retreat. You're delusional, he said. But the volume had dropped. Phase 2. You gave me that software freely. It was a gift, a family contribution. There's no... You promised me 50%. You never filed the papers. I don't know what you're talking about. You removed my name from the charter while I was deployed to Djibouti, while I was incommunicado, while I was in a SCIF routing classified assets through corridors you don't have clearance to know exist. The word clearance landed like a stone in water. Gordon blinked. Keith, who had been approaching from behind, stopped walking. Even the chandelier overhead seemed to hold still. Then the doors opened. Not the side doors, not the service entrance. The main double doors at the front of the ballroom, the ones with the brass handles and the etched glass panels that Gordon had installed last year because he wanted guests to feel like they were entering something important. The sound came first. Boots. Not dress shoes. Not loafers. Combat boots. Heavy-soled. Regulation. Striking marble with a cadence that every soldier in every branch recognizes in their sleep. 2 sets. Measured. Precise. The rhythm of men who do not enter rooms by accident. Every head in the ballroom turned. Brigadier General Thomas Miller walked through the doors first. Tall. Silver-haired. His dress uniform pressed to geometric perfection. Ribbons stacked in rows across his left chest. More color than most people in that room had seen on a single human being. The single silver star on each shoulder caught the overhead light and held it. Behind him, Colonel David Brooks, leaner, younger, carrying a leather portfolio under his left arm. His JAG insignia was visible at 10 paces. They didn't look at Gordon. They didn't look at Keith. They didn't acknowledge the 200 guests who had frozen mid-breath, champagne glasses suspended, forks hovering, napkins clutched in motionless hands. General Miller's gaze swept the room once, clinical, efficient, and found me standing at the edge of the dance floor. His eyes dropped to my lapel, to the silver pin, crossed cannons over a wheel. He crossed the ballroom floor. His boots struck marble in 4-count intervals. Colonel Brooks fell in step behind him. The only sound in the room was leather on stone and the distant hum of the servers running my code behind the walls. He stopped 2 paces in front of me. Gordon's hand was extended. He'd stepped forward. Instinct, reflex, the CEO greeting the most important person in the room. His palm hung in the air between them. General Miller did not take it. He did not look at it. He looked at me. He squared his shoulders. His right hand came up, crisp, deliberate, textbook, and snapped to his brow. A salute. A brigadier general of the United States Army, saluting a woman at table 9 in a charcoal dress and a pin everyone had mistaken for costume jewelry. Major Renard. His voice carried across the silent ballroom the way voices carry across parade grounds. Clear, certain, final. Ma'am, the forensic audit of the Vanguard protocol is verified. We're ready to initiate the recovery. He held the salute. I returned it, and 200 guests, including my father, whose hand still hung in empty air, went very, very quiet. Gordon's arm dropped to his side. The color left his face in stages, forehead first, then cheeks, then lips, like watching a tide pull out from a shore. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. He started. He didn't finish. Colonel Brooks stepped forward. He opened the leather portfolio with the precision of a man who had done this 200 times and never once enjoyed it. Inside was a document, cream-colored paper, federal seal embossed at the top, 3 signatures along the bottom margin. He didn't hand it to Gordon. He placed it on the podium Gordon had been standing behind 4 minutes ago, celebrating himself. Mr. Renard. Brooks's voice was flat. No theater, no inflection, just jurisdiction. This is a federal intellectual property injunction issued under dual-use military asset statutes. Effective immediately, all servers, workstations, and network devices operating software containing the Vanguard signature are to be surrendered to Army forensic custody. Gordon stared at the document. He didn't touch it. His hands hung at his sides like they'd forgotten what they were for. "You can't..." Keith's voice came from somewhere behind him, higher than usual, faster. "This is a private company. You can't just walk in here and..." General Miller turned his head. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The single star on his shoulder did the talking. Keith's mouth closed like a door on a spring. Miller turned back to me. His expression shifted. Not softer, but different. The expression of a commanding officer addressing someone he trusted with things he couldn't say in this room. "Major, when you coded the original Renard Alpha engine at Bagram in 2012, what designation did your unit assign to the supply corridor between FOB Chapman and the Northern Resupply Point?" The verification question, the one only 2 people in that room could answer. The one that had nothing to do with Renard Freight, and everything to do with proving I was who every screen in the building had already declared me to be. I swallowed. Corridor 7 Bravo. We called it the bottleneck. Average transit window was 41 minutes before hostile interdiction made the route non-viable. The algorithm I built reduced that window to 11 minutes by rerouting through a secondary lateral that nobody had mapped because it required thermal imaging to verify the road surface could hold vehicle weight. Miller nodded. Once, almost imperceptibly. It wasn't approval. It was memory. That algorithm, he said, is currently deployed across 3 active theaters of operation. It has been adapted into the Vanguard protocol, a Tier 2 classified logistics automation system used by Joint Special Operations Command. Major Renard is its architect, its sole architect. He paused. Let the word soul settle across the room like a verdict. The civilian variant she provided to Mr. Renard in 2015 was stripped of classified architecture but retained proprietary code signatures that constitute intellectual property of a commissioned officer of the United States Army. He turned to face the room. Not Gordon. Not Keith. The room. What you are looking at on those screens is not a system glitch. It is a forensic verification confirming that every module, every routing pathway, and every line of optimized code running Renard Freight's operations was authored by Major Elise Renard. The unauthorized commercialization of this software without the author's consent constitutes theft of a dual-use military asset. The silence that followed was architectural. It had weight. It had walls. Colonel Brooks reached into the portfolio again. A second document. Thinner. He turned to Gordon. Mr. Renard, this is a preliminary findings summary from the forensic audit conducted over the past 3 weeks. The Vanguard signature was confirmed in 914 discrete software modules across your enterprise system. Every module traces to source code timestamped between September and December 2012, authored at Bagram Airfield under Major Renard's service credentials. He set the page beside the first. Gordon hadn't moved. He was staring at the podium the way a man stares at an eviction notice taped to his own front door. 914, Brooks continued. Your IT department attempted to delete the embedded signature on 2 occasions. It regenerated autonomously because it was hard-coded into the root architecture. Your team classified it as a legacy bug. They filed a support ticket. They moved on. Gordon's left hand closed into a fist. Opened. Closed again. The tick. The old tick. I'd been watching it since I was a child. At the dinner table, in his office. During arguments, he always won because volume was his only weapon, and he'd never met a wall he couldn't shout through. The wall was here now. It wore a star. The error message, Keith said. His voice was barely above a whisper. He'd moved to the edge of the stage. His bourbon was gone. His hands were empty. The one I couldn't delete. The one that kept coming back every cycle. He looked at me. That was your signature? I held his gaze. That was always my signature, Keith. Gordon's voice cracked the silence. She gave me that software. Phase 2. Defensive, stammering. She gave it freely. It was a family, a contribution. I didn't steal anything. She wanted to help the business. You promised 50%, I said. You never filed the papers. You removed my name from the charter while I was deployed. You told clients I was let go for incompetence. You told the family I quit. I didn't. You did. 2 words. Own paragraph. The room absorbed them the way dry ground absorbs rain. Gordon's shoulders dropped. Not a slump. A collapse. The kind of postural failure that begins in the spine and works outward until the whole frame looks like it's been unstrung. He reached for the podium, missed it by an inch. His hand landed on the injunction instead. The paper crumpled under his fingers. I built this company, he said. But the voice was wrong now. Thin, stripped of its stage projection. The voice of a man who has just realized that the foundation under his feet belongs to someone else. 30 years. I built. You built a brand, I said. I built the system, and you're currently standing on it. Even the fire in the warming trays along the catering station seemed to dim. General Miller stepped to my left, not in front of me, beside me. The positioning was deliberate. A brigadier general standing beside a major, facing a civilian. The geometry of that arrangement communicated more than any sentence could. Mr. Renard, Miller said, I want to be clear about what happens next. Colonel Brooks will oversee the seizure of all networked hardware on these premises tonight. A federal forensic team is currently en route. You and your son will be required to provide full depositions within 72 hours. Any attempt to alter, destroy, or relocate digital assets before that time will result in criminal obstruction charges. Gordon opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Phase 3. Single syllables dying before they reached air. Additionally, Brooks said, not looking up from his portfolio, the Army Criminal Investigation Division has opened a preliminary inquiry into the unauthorized commercialization of dual-use military technology. Depending on the outcome of that inquiry, this matter may be referred to the United States Attorney's Office for prosecution. Keith swayed. Slightly, the kind of motion you'd miss if you weren't trained to notice when a person's balance shifts from confidence to vertigo. He reached for the back of his father's chair. Missed, caught the edge of the table instead. I didn't know, Keith said. I didn't know it was... You didn't ask. My voice didn't waver. You never asked, Keith. Not once. Not where the code came from. Not why the error kept regenerating. Not what I actually did for 15 years. You didn't want the truth. You wanted a confession. You wanted me to be the sister who failed so that your success had a shadow to stand against. Keith's mouth opened, then closed. Phase 4. Silence. The most honest sound he'd made all evening. Sarah stood at table 6. She hadn't moved toward me. She hadn't spoken, but her hands were pressed flat against the tablecloth, and her eyes were wet. And she was nodding, slowly, privately. The nod of a woman who had spent 15 years holding a suspicion she could never prove and had just watched it validated in front of 200 witnesses. I looked at her. She looked at me. That was enough. Gordon sank into his chair. The chair at the head table. The one with the cushion. The one positioned center stage. The one he'd sat in all evening like a throne. He sank into it the way a man sinks into something he knows he'll never sit in again. You've spent your life making everything loud, Gordon. I let the words land one at a time. The toasts, the banners, the announcements. But some things grow more powerful the quieter they are. I didn't build an empire. I built a system that works in silence, in places you'll never see, for people you'll never meet. And you took it. Not because you understood it, because you understood that no one would ever check. I paused. They checked. It wasn't obedience. It wasn't ceremony. It was 15 years of silence breaking open, not with a shout, but with a frequency only the room could feel. The federal forensic team arrived at 11:47 p.m. 4 technicians in civilian clothes with Army credentials and equipment cases that hummed when they powered up. They started with the servers in the back office, then the terminals, then the cloud infrastructure access points. Colonel Brooks supervised from the hallway. Gordon watched from his chair. He didn't stand for 3 hours, The IP claim moved through federal court in 14 weeks. The forensic software audit, the full one, not the preliminary summary Brooks had carried in his portfolio, confirmed my source code signatures embedded in every module of the Renard Freight operating system. 914 modules, every one time-stamped, every one traceable to my service credentials and my hardware key. The court awarded me 60% ownership. Keith resigned the following Tuesday. He submitted a one-paragraph letter to the board. No defense. No counterclaim. He cleaned out his corner office, the one that had been my office, with the window overlooking the loading docks and the crack in the baseboard I'd noticed when I was 19, and drove away in a truck he no longer had the title to maintain. Gordon retired. The word retired was generous. The board gave him the option, after the CID inquiry concluded that his commercialization of the civilian variant constituted unauthorized appropriation of dual-use technology. No criminal charges. The U.S. attorney declined prosecution on the condition of full asset surrender and a non-disclosure agreement that Gordon would spend the rest of his life unable to discuss. Silence, it turned out, was contagious. The family called. Not all of them. Not at first. Awkward voicemails. Texts that started with, "I had no idea," and ended with nothing useful. I didn't return most of them. Sarah called once. She didn't apologize. She didn't ask questions. She said, "I always knew you were something they couldn't see." I held the phone for a long time after she hung up. No conditions. No advice. Just that. I renamed the logistics division. Not Renard Systems. Not Vanguard Solutions. Walker Systems. After my mother. After Margaret Walker Renard, who died when I was 14, and who once told me that the loudest person in the room is usually the one who knows the least. I hired 3 veteran programmers, 2 from Fort Lee, 1 from Aberdeen Proving Ground. People who understood that the best systems don't announce themselves. They just work. The Vanguard protocol continues to operate in theaters I can't name, routing assets through corridors that don't appear on civilian maps, saving lives in a silence so complete it will never make a headline. And I work at Walker Systems now. No banners, no galas, no gold embossing. Just a lease. Just a desk near the window overlooking the loading docks. Just the quiet hum of servers running code. I wrote in a tent in Afghanistan when I was 26 years old, and the only light was the blue glow of a monitor, and the only sound was the generator cutting in and out like a heartbeat that refused to stop. There is power in patience. There is freedom in truth, even if it comes late. Silence had always been the language of my life. They mistook it for emptiness, for failure, for proof that I didn't matter. They were wrong. Silence was the architecture. Silence was the system. Silence was the signature they couldn't delete no matter how many times they tried. I am no longer missing. If you enjoyed this story about quiet competence winning over loud arrogance, hit that like button and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell for more stories just like this one. Thanks for watching.